Oh, tough catch. That was nice hands.
This may be one of the better catches we've seen all
Good battle.
season. When your hands are above your body like that.
Wow. Going long. Got him. Speed.
What a dime. Right in stride with Jamison Williams, and he does the rest.
The Lions wide receivers were exceptional in 2024, largely thanks to the work ethic of Amon Ra St. Brown. But if the Sun God were to go down, would this unit be able to stand up? Welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Johnny Gaz. Thank you for returning for another video. Let's dive back into our positional breakdowns. This time, let's zone in on the pass catchers, those wide receivers. In this video, we'll look at the Lions depth chart. We'll take a look at the Lions free agents at wide receivers and maybe some potential targets that could be out there. Then we'll discuss their draft strategy. In the end, we'll determine if the Lions wide receiver group is a strength or if it's a problem. Let's go. Detroit's wide receiver group last year was led by Amon Ra St. Brown, who for the second straight season in a row was selected as an All-Pro. Jamison Williams had his breakout season for the first time, going over 1,000 yards in his career. The Lions' pair of receivers, Amon Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams, both went over 1,000 yards, first for the Lions since 2017. This wide receiver group was rounded out by Tim Patrick, standing at 6'5". He was a late preseason addition to this team, and he filled in the X-receiver role well for the Detroit Lions offense. The Lions wide receiver group is asked to do so much more than just catch passes. They are very heavily involved in the run game. Amon Ra St. Brown himself is so willing to block, and in the former Ben Johnson scheme for the Detroit Lions offense, the wide receivers were a key piece to the run game success. Being able to score touchdowns at the end of long runs were very much due to players like Tim Patrick, Amon Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Khalif Raymond, everyone involved in the tight end group, those guys blocking downfield. So there's a lot more involvement than just running routes and catching passes in the Lions offense. That's something that's been expected by Dan Campbell and the culture established by the Lions. The Lions will be returning their top two wide receiver pieces as well as their kick returner Khalif Raymond, but they will have some decisions to make. So let's dive into the depth chart at wide receiver for the Detroit Lions and see what they'll have going into 2025. Here's a look at the Lions depth chart. Let's focus in on the wide receivers. And obviously at the top is the All-Pro, the captain, the hardest working team on the roster, Amon Ra St. Brown. And he leads by example. Obviously, his play speaks for itself. 115 receptions on the season, 1,263 yards, 12 TDs, and he's everything that you want in a star wide receiver. There is nothing diva about Amon Ra St. Brown. He's your hardest working player. He's everything that Dan Campbell wants in your team captain, and it's the perfect guy to lead up that room of wide receivers. The Sun God got a hefty extension this past offseason. He signed through 2028. Actually carries a small cap hit in 2025, only $13.5 million, I think, riding the fifth-year option of his rookie deal, and then everything kind of comes to a head the next season there. But he's solidified for several years to come, and again, he's everything you want in that lead player. The question is, what falls in line behind him and what could potentially happen if someone else had to step in if Amon Ra had to miss some time? And that's where Jamison Williams comes into play. He solidified himself as the number 2 wide receiver on this team, became more consistent as far as number of targets he was getting, the way he was able to contribute, not only in pass catching, but blocking downfield, as we discussed here. No block, no rock in this Lions offense, and he is certainly willing to do so. He had great numbers this season, sort of broke out, as we said, over 1,000 yards for the first time in his career. Jamison Williams had 58 receptions, 1,001 yards, had 7 receptions. It was also a threat in the running game as well. Jamison Williams is signed through the 2025 season on his rookie deal, and then the Lions can decide if they want to extend a fifth-year option because he was drafted in the first round. That fifth-year option would put him somewhere in the range of $15 to $16 million, which isn't terrible compared to what Amon Ra St. Brown would be making on his new contract, which will pay him about $27 million in 2026. The question will be long term. What do the Lions do with Jameson Williams? Again, we know he had off the field issues, and last year was no exception. He had the weapons charge, which I think everything's been dismissed and that's been taken care of. But the truth is, it's just something the Lions in this new culture probably don't want to have to deal with. So to me, you have to see another year or two of cleanliness outside of the field. And if he can do that and remain consistent where he's shown in his play, then I really believe he's on track for that contract. But to me, I think the wide receiver position is one that you can find players if you had to. No, you can't just replace his speed. But in this particular situation, because you already have a bunch of money invested in the room, I really want to see multiple seasons of cleanliness on and off the field for Jameson Williams. And after the 2026 season, we can certainly look at a new contract. All off season last year, we talked about the Lions missing that X wide receiver, the big body target for Jared Goff in this offense. And they found it in Tim Patrick, who was cut from the Denver Broncos just prior to the season. Lions snagged him up, and he became such a great addition to this Lions offense and was that perfect fit, standing at 6'5". Actually ended up with 33 receptions, 394 yards, and had 3 touchdowns to contribute in the 2024 season. Patrick will actually be an unrestricted free agent as we enter 2025, and this may be the biggest decision the Lions have to make in this wide receiver room here as they enter next season. And again, Tim Patrick was a trusted target. He was reliable and was certainly willing to block in this Lions offense. And he's a little bit older, but he fits that big body X wide receiver the Lions need, and obviously they have that trust in him. So I think they'd like to have him back. But Tim Patrick, because he's getting towards the end of his career, this could be his last opportunity to make bigger money. And will the Lions ultimately be willing to pay him to match a bigger contract elsewhere, or is he willing to take a discount to stay in Detroit to be with a winner? So those are big questions that we have to see what the Lions want to do here as we enter the 2025 offseason. I think if the price is right, the Lions try to bring him back. I think they want to limit all of the rooms or units that they can where they have to make any other decisions as far as free agents and in the draft. And then really the question will be the price point. What does Tim Patrick want to do? If he's looking for the biggest contract possible, then maybe this isn't in the cards. And maybe the Lions look to fill that spot for players that they have behind him here in the depth chart, which we'll look for in a moment. But if it's up to me, I would look to sign Tim Patrick again if that price is right. Short term, another 1-year deal, and we roll. Then there's the jack of all trades wide receiver, Khalif Raymond, who really does everything for the Lions and really specializes in kick returns, but did contribute to the Lions offense this year. Had 17 receptions, 215 yards, and 2 scores, but really shined in the special teams role. And kind of fits the bill, is willing to do anything and everything for this Lions team. The front office, the coaching staff loves Khalif Raymond, and he is coming back for the 2025 season. Now getting into some of the depth, let's start with Allen Robinson, who the Lions really like having as a veteran leader, and I think especially as Dan Campbell's kind of veteran squad, he doesn't like to refer to the practice squad as that. He really likes Allen Robinson. Now, he didn't contribute much. I think he was at 3 receptions, 30 yards, so not much there. But I know that they think they can get some more out of him if needed. I just think you have a good group in front of him, so you don't need much. But again, if we're talking about maybe potentially having an injury or two in that room, could Allen Robinson step in and get a spot start here and there? I think the Lions would be confident in that. Now, he is another unrestricted free agent, so they're going to have to make a decision on him, but I really don't think it's going to cost much. So I think the Lions do end up bring him back because they trust him, and they really hold true to that culture of trust. And if they can get him at the right price, I do think Allen Robinson is on the team here as we enter 25. And here's a really interesting case. Antoine Green, who I thought the Lions wanted to fill the X wide receiver role coming into 2024, but he ended up getting hurt pretty seriously in the preseason and going on injured reserve. He didn't play a snap last season, but he is signed through 2026. And he's younger. The Lions drafted him with some ideas to fit him into a depth role here, I would assume, in the wide receiver room. And I think they're going to want to see what they can get out of him. So he's going to have a very important offseason this year. And to me, if the Lions don't end up re-signing Tim Patrick, I think Antoine Green is heavily in the plans as that X wide receiver replacement. Then listed here, you have Tom Kennedy and Ronnie Bell. Both were signed to futures contracts. Ronnie Bell is a former Michigan Wolverine, so you wonder if he can get himself in the mix. The other guy also not listed here, Donovan Peoples-Jones, another Michigan Wolverine. He's a street free agent who the Lions may also get back into the mix. Again, all guys that could play a role if they don't go back to Tim Patrick. So truly, the Lions don't have many holes to fill in the wide receiver room. It will come down to what the Lions decide to do with ex-wide receiver Tim Patrick. Now, if they just decide to not bring him back, or if they really think they need to add weapons to this team as far as wide receivers, I don't know that looking at free agency is the way to go. And I've looked over the list of available free agents, and I just don't think the Lions are going to be willing to overspend on some of the higher priced free agents that'll be out there. Let's say a T. Higgins. And again, I don't know, even with some of the guys that you might be able to get at the right price, if you really want to bring them in. Now, two names that stuck out to me, I believe, were Keenan Allen, who will be coming from the Chicago Bears, and I thought had a very down year there, but he's ultimately always been a Lion killer. And I think he'd be good in this offense. I think, again, it'd be a one-year deal. It'd be a prove-it situation, and only if Tim Patrick doesn't come back or you feel good about what you get behind him. Because, again, his production wasn't there. He dropped a lot of passes this year, so there was a lot of bad within the same division as the Lions. But, again, I think within the Lions offense, you're not asking anything of him. You really are going to use him in spot situations as that true X-wide receiver. You hope he'll get you a ball here and there, and I think he could be your guy. The other guy that stood out to me was coming from the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Williams. And, again, there's a injury recovery situation, so the Lions have that history of taking the chance on that kind of player. He is a jump ball weapon when healthy, but is he the right guy and the right fit for the Lions? I'm just not sure. And again, are the Lions willing to pay for the name to add to this room? And again, it really comes down to, do they really need him if Tim Patrick leaves the organization? But outside of that, I just don't think there's the right free agent fit that I'm seeing at the right price for the Lions. So in turn, I think maybe they look towards the draft. And I think the only reason they end up taking a wide receiver, let's say higher in the draft, is if the right fit falls to them, because they are in a situation where they don't have a true hole. I would probably argue it's defensive line as the true need. But if at 28, pick 28, if the right wide receiver falls to them and it's the right guy and they really like the fit, believe me, Brad Holmes will take that player. They're not afraid to add to this offense. Is that the right move? Well, we'll have to see. I mean, you would have said the same thing about Jahmyr Gibbs. So if that sort of situation happens again and they want to add to that room, that's where I see that happening. Certainly more so over than what I saw on the free agent list. So it'll really come down as the right player follow the Lions in the draft to where they say, okay, we're not going to pass on this wide receiver. And if so, more talent would be welcome in that room. Adding it to Amon Ra St. Brown, the speed of Jamison Williams, you have Khalif Raymond. So there could be a lot of upside to adding young talent to the wide receivers of the Detroit Lions. The outlook for 2025 at wide receiver for the Lions is bright. Any unit led by Amon Ra St. Brown is off to a good start. His leadership, the captain, the hardest working player, the all-pro. Behind him, the speed, the explosiveness of Jamison Williams. But you still have all those questions of off the field. Can he give you the consistency that you've seen on the field for the next season? Then you have the reliability, the expertise of his special teams explosiveness, Khalif Raymond. Do the Lions bring back Tim Patrick? That's really the true question this offseason for this group. Do they re-sign or do they look outside of the organization? We know the offense is going to look just a little bit different. Lions are bringing in a new offensive coordinator to replace Ben Johnson, who we know left for the Chicago Bears. Well, in turn, the Lions bring in a familiar face, former quarterback coach and offensive assistant John Morton, who's coming in from the Denver Broncos, who we know is a little bit more pass-heavy, and they may rely on these wide receivers just a bit more. So what do the Lions do with this unit to tweak it to keep this offense humming as they head into 2025? There aren't many units or teams in the NFL that could survive a major injury to their best player. When a guy like Aiden Hutchinson goes down, the defensive line for the Lions fell off, and in turn, the Lions had a tough time recovering, ultimately leading to a loss in Washington in the divisional round. So you have to imagine if a guy like Amon Ra St. Brown went down, that the Lions wide receiver group would really fall off, and potentially their entire offense. But the truth is, the wide receiver group for the Detroit Lions is a mega strength. It's led by one of the best wide receivers in all of football, a two-time All-Pro, and the hardest working player in potentially all of the NFL, the Sun God. If they're able to get the consistency of Jameson Williams for another season and beyond, this unit will continue to flourish. Yes, there's questions at the X wide receiver and what may happen behind him, but the truth is the Lions have built reliable depth. They may not be flashy guys or flashy names, but they're guys that would be willing to step in and able to step in if a major injury occurred. So at this point, no, I don't believe the Lions wide receiver group is any sort of problem, but it may be their ultimate strength. That will do it for my wide receiver breakdown for the Lions. What do you guys think of that position group for Detroit? Do they have the right mix of players still? Do they go into next season with the same group? Do they re-sign Tim Patrick? Or is there a player out there in free agency or the draft you think the Lions have to bring in to complete this offense? I appreciate you guys coming along for another video. If you dig the vibe here at Johnny Gaz Sports, please hit that like button. It's the best free way to help out the channel. I'd love to get this video to 100 likes. I'd also love it if you consider subscribing. We're on the road to 3,000 now, and I believe we will get there thanks to you guys. If you hit the notify bell, you won't miss any future videos. More than anything else, make sure to take care of yourself and that mental health. That's so important, and I want to make sure you come back and see me on future videos. I hope you guys have a fantastic week ahead. Go Lions.